And one part of what we want to do here, doing this Global Dialogue Lab, is just very simple to come together. We, Elizabeth and I, we are still fascinated by the Zoom technology, that it's so easy to have people from the States, Europe, Philippines, India, just coming together on a screen and just giving us also the time to land in this particular space that we are together in here, is something that we think is a new form of creating global relationships around the question how to create change and how to also transform how we can create change. And to do this, it is always a good starting point to realize that seeing each other on the screen already allows us to be in this kind of virtual but very real and very live space where real conversations can take place. And we very much hope that we will dive into real conversations today.
Okay. All right. So maybe let's keep the videos on, and everyone but Bayo and Charles and Thomas and I will turn off your audio, and then let's start a conversation. Okay, thank you very much. I think makes sense to introduce you, Charles, even though I think everyone's here because they know who you are. And I wanted to say that that one of the reasons why I've been excited about your work is that you come at change making from such a place of aliveness and optimism, and also deeply engaging with the reality of what it is that we're doing on this planet, and we're doing to this planet and to other forms of life. So what I appreciate about what you are doing and have done is you're really holding the whole thing together in a way that doesn't come together. I mean, it's not about having a neat set of ideas, but that allows the messiness, the disturbingness, and also the positivity of life to all be there. And I think I'd be curious to know how you came to that, and maybe that's a starting point for us to to speak further.
Okay, can you hear me then?
Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad that everyone here knows who I am, because I'm not really sure who I am. So if I get confused, maybe I can ask you. But it's true, like I'm not, the guy with the answer, that's for sure. And in fact, I think that the reflex that is prevalent in our civilization of looking for the guy with the answer, or even looking for the answer, doesn't always serve. I'm not going to say that it never serves. In fact, probably it usually serves. But there are special moments in the soul's journey, including the oversoul of a society or civilization, the collective soul. There are phases in that journey where the rush to an answer keeps you trapped, because all of the answers are coming from the story that you're already in, from the picture of reality from the understanding of how the world works that you're already in. So, you know, it's kind of like Einstein said, right? You can't, I'm not even going to quote it because it's such a cliche now. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. So in those moments, like this urgency to find the solution, whether it's from an authority or even just from yourself, like this like, okay, I've got to know, I've got to understand what to do. That there's a certain phase that I think that we're entering into where we have to let go of that and experience a little bit of unknowing and of letting go of what we thought we knew, so that completely new answers and ways of seeing can rush into the vacuum that is the unknowing. But even this, okay, I'll say this one more quick thing. Even this can be turned into another answer. Oh, okay, good. I know what to do now. I have to do unknowing. I have to do surrender. I have to do letting go. And there's a subtle trap in that where it becomes fake surrender or a pretense of letting go. So it's almost like, what should we do right now is the wrong question. I think what's happening at this point is something that's being done to us. And from that process, new doings will arise through us. But it's almost like there's nothing to do right now. But I'm also not arguing for passivity, because that becomes another thing to do. Like not doing, this is getting like way cerebral now, but not doing can become a thing to do too. So it's almost like I can't tell you anything. Yet I've found, paradoxically, that articulating this actually helps people move into and through the process. Just to say, it's okay not to know. Like, it is okay not to know. It is okay that all of our solutions have run up against the wall of futility, and we just don't know what to do. I'll leave it at that for the moment.
If I may jump in and just ask you, because as you said, the not knowing can be also become a form of knowing. I find it very interesting to look into this. And when I listen to you and just try to understand, okay, so what should I do or not do right now? I honestly, I feel quite confused. And maybe that's exactly what you want me to be. And at the same time, obviously, we are doing something. I mean, at least we are here on this video setting and having a conversation. And we are, I guess, agreeing that we do want change. And what I do appreciate is that this uncomfortable feeling that I really don't know what you want me to do or not to do leaves me in a spot where I try to kind of figure out. So we are here. We set up this conversation. We started to talk about change, but how to do this without knowing and without not knowing, and still not just basically staring into each other's eyes, although that could be also great for some time. So where to go from here?
Okay, so there's one universal principle of radical activism that I will offer you, which is to enter any situation where you feel called to be an agent of change with the intention of understanding what it is like to be you. So if you're entering a situation of, genetically modified crops taking over India because Monsanto is pushing them, then you might start with, what is it like to be an executive at Monsanto? Or what is it like to be a farmer in India? Or what is it like to be a government official? If you're entering maybe a one-on-one healing situation or a conflict of some sort? What is it like to be that person? If you are a farmer and you're exploring kind of permaculture and regenerative agriculture, what is it like to be the soil? What is it like to be the cow? What is it like to be the plant? Because a lot of our reflexive and futile actions are coming from a delusion. And the delusion is born of an incorrect understanding of what is it like to be Donald Trump? What is it like to be a Monsanto executive? What is it like to be a banker? What is it like to be a perpetrator? Mm-hmm. We don't even really go into that question very much, but instead we live in a world of projections. That's the opposite of empathy. Mm-hmm. Empathy is to understand what it's like to be another person. So as a principle of just pragmatism, to ask that question and to really sincerely ask it and be open to the answer and open sensorially to that knowing of what is it like to be you, and intellectually too, and understand the story behind it. What is it like to be a terrorist? Why are they actually doing that? Mm-hmm. The answer that we get in the media here is that they're bad. They're fundamentalists. They got some bad idea. And as long as we believe that, then the solution from that perception is obvious. You bomb them, you drone them because they're bad. You got to stop them. You got to surveil them. You got to, right? And then because we're acting from unreality, from an inaccurate perception of reality, nothing is going to change. And in fact, the story that we're operating from is going to perpetuate itself. So because we are so trapped in our stories as a civilization, that's why I'm talking about not doing anything. It's not a universal principle. The universal principle is compassion, is empathy. And from that, once you perceive, see, this is a relearning, an unlearning and a relearning of how to see, of how we understand reality, not as a bunch of separate selves. If you guys are familiar with the work I do, then like this whole discourse, right? The separate self and so on. But the habits of that way of seeing are so deep. So to undo those, to understand that we're not separate selves, that we are interbeings, from that perception, new doings arise. And I'm not saying don't do those, but I'm actually even oversimplifying the whole thing, because it's not, a linear process necessarily, where now it's time to be in the space between stories. Now it's time to be in the unknowing. And now I'm done with that. And, it's much more fractal than that. But still, if you want like a principle, something to do, then I would say to practice the empathic way of relating to the world. At least you'll be in reality then, and you can be an effective agent of change, not going to war against enemies that you manufacture through your conditional narratives.
So I have a question about that.
I'm open to questions. I'm not in charge of this thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Is that okay?
Go ahead.
So, Charles, I hear you speaking about our relationship to other human beings. And my question is, how do I don't know, part of my confusion is, I don't know how to host the reality of what's happening to the planet that we live on. I don't know what to do with that. I read the other day that there's so much plastic in the ocean that soon it will outnumber the plankton. And the thought of the floor of the ocean being plastic just horrified me so much. I don't know how to be with the enormous sadness that has come up.
Yeah.
But I think that sadness has incredible wisdom to it, doesn't it? I mean, wisdom. I mean, it's just real. I mean, that just seems to me to be an appropriate response. You know, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it maybe it becomes. Maybe it becomes not appropriate at some point if it becomes a thing that means you never get out of bed in the morning. But I mean, grief is an incredibly powerful process,
Mm-hmm.
incredibly powerful process, and it's surprising where it takes you, and you can't fake it. You know, you can't. I mean, that's my experience. That you can't fake your way out of it, or put on a smiley face on top of it, or try to feel sad when you don't, or you know, but there, and I think this is part of what I respect about Charles's work, or one of the things is it's like, let's stay with, you know, let's not run away from that. This is what the human is doing, you know, and we're that.
Yeah. And in our society, it's difficult because we don't have socially sanctioned ways to express grief or to hold grief. You know, we don't have public occasions for grieving, really, except maybe funerals. And even that is very repressed. You know, people don't even cry that much at funerals sometimes. Or if they do, it's like this private thing, or this slightly embarrassing outburst. But yeah, I mean, this is part of the whole system is set up to perpetuate the system. And if we were really able to feel our grief and to connect with the painful things that are happening in the world that are grievous, then the world as we know it would not be able to go on.
Mm-hmm.
So grief suppression is part of the machine. And it's and the machine's breaking down, you know, and a lot of people are doing grief practices now. Aldo Some, you know, Francis Weller, like a lot of people are now building social mechanisms to hold grief, and it's part of the change that we're going through. But yeah, like just by yourself in your bedroom, I mean, geez, it seems endless sometimes.
Yeah. I really would like to further understand, Charles, what you're asking for. Because talking about grief, I just recently saw several times, and I guess quite some of us will have seen this. There is this video about Aleppo. There's a drone that basically is flying through Aleppo, and you just see this unbelievable, devastated, what used to be a city. And I mean, if you don't start to grieve there, I don't know where you can start to grieve. And it leaves me with the question. Okay, this is happening right now. It's not so far from here, from Europe. It's more or less in the neighborhood, and the refugees of Aleppo are arriving here in Germany, and it asks something from me. I do appreciate that everything that kicks in, who is guilty, the Russians bombing, the oil interest, all these kind of things basically make me part of the story of separation, as I understand you. All these things where I feel, I have to be on the right side, and I see who on the other side is on the wrong side, is part of the story of separation. At the same time, I really, I feel guilty not to respond. And part of what we're doing, even part of doing this conversation and the other activities, is motivated by it needs a response, and it needs me. But there's a lot of mixture of knowing and not knowing, to be honest. I don't know. There are a lot of things. I have ideas, and I also think I have to go with ideas. At the same time, it makes me hesitant. It also makes me more hesitant to listen to you. But I also don't want to be in a paralyzed situation where I just don't know that I don't know. I really would like to, and maybe that's the wrong thing, because I really would like to the point where I know what to do, how to respond. Maybe that's already the wrong thing to do. But I try to understand the point you're making in response to this.
Bayo, did you?
Yeah, maybe Bayo wants to. Bayo, I'm sure, has a lot of thoughts on everything that's been said. And I would love to. I'll definitely talk about Aleppo and Syria, and let's let Bayo.
Yeah. Charles, I don't want those thoughts to escape you, because I know how they could easily just slip by. So share that, and yeah, I'll just keep.
Okay.
I'll say something afterwards. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the short answer would be just when your intellectual guidance fails you about what to do and what not to do, there's something else that you can listen to. What just calls to you, what makes you feel alive to do it? A friend of mine just spent some time in refugee camps. She's an acupuncturist. And she was there with Acupuncturists Without Borders at this refugee camp, Syrian refugee camp. And with some other NGOs, Red Cross, et cetera, et cetera. And after a few weeks there, the refugees got so fed up with the NGOs that they kicked them out of the camp because they were so patronizing, so arrogant. One Red Cross, a refugee came up to the Red Cross tent and said, "Hey, do you have any hand sanitizer that I could use? There's no water, my hands are dirty." And she makes this sarcastic remark to someone else behind the desk saying, "Oh, I'm surprised she doesn't want it for her whole body, these filthy Syrians," Where these people were coming from. I mean, Aleppo, before it was destroyed, it was a modern city. People had cars and buses and, stereos and computers and apartments. I mean, they lived like a fairly modern lifestyle. It was a pretty developed country. So I guess what I'm saying, what I wanted to say when you were speaking is that, as far as this, Aleppo, and I want to do something, and then kind of skipping from one crisis to another and to another, and should I respond to that, or should I respond to the seabirds washing up with plastic, choking their stomachs, or what about the eviction of the last uncontacted tribes to get at the rare earth minerals, and what about all of these things, these big traumas that are happening on the earth that can sometimes, my wife Stella was writing about this in the context of femininity, and growing up as a woman, and she never had any big traumas, but her whole childhood was kind of like one ongoing, more muted trauma, just like being shut inside a classroom, being set into competition with your peers, the subtle oppression that is mirrored in extreme form in places like Aleppo, but that affects everybody. So I feel like any response is the right response that comes from a knowing that it's not supposed to be this way. Mm-hmm. Even if your passion is to just change the school system, or to free an orca from captivity. I imagine myself sometimes face to face with maybe a refugee family whose child died or had some terrible trauma. And they ask me, they look me right in the face and they say, what were you doing when this happened to us? Mm-hmm. And if I say to them, I was playing video games, I feel like I wouldn't be able to meet their gaze. But if I were saying to them, I was taking care of my grandmother who was sick, or I was trying to free a prisoner from death row, even if it has no apparent direct relationship to what was happening to them, there's some part of both of us that knows that it is relevant. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think that rather than be buffeted by the endless media stream of crisis and catastrophe, that we really listen to what is the thing that calls us into action from a place of compassion and healing. And it could be one of those political things. It could be Aleppo, but it could be the children in your neighborhood. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Hi, my question is real quick. How does all this esoteric stuff, which we're thinking and talking about and feeling, translate in a practical way to really change society? And I'm constantly trying to connect. If I was one of these people who had to work 2 or 3 jobs and never saw their family just to keep a roof over their head and food on their plate, never had any time to even think of looking at any alternative ideas, how do we, in a practical way, help that person contribute or invest their energy into doing this? So anyway, that's my constant challenge. Thank you.
I don't think anything I've said is esoteric. The main point I was making is this universal principle for effective action. It's not a principle for getting to feel good about yourself because you are compassionate. It is effective. You can actually be much more effective if you understand the situation that you're in. If you understand, if you demonize, for example, the police who are shooting black people and stuff, and you operate from that assumption that they're just horrible monsters, then you're not going to be as effective as if you're in reality. Like, I'm just talking about being in reality. But so much of what we're accustomed to as far as political action or social action or even relationship action goes, so much of what we're accustomed to is not based in reality. It's based on a false story of separation. Mm-hmm. Based on judgment, it's based on projection. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more practical than what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, Bayo, I'd love to make space for you to respond also. Whichever direction you want to go in.
Yeah, I'll say a few things. I just want to offer some thoughts there. And it's usually difficult to do it where Charles speaks because it's probably he said everything I want to say. And I might as well just keep quiet. Yeah, laugh it up if you want to, Charles.
I and I are a little telepathic sometimes.
Yeah, but so I was thinking about this notion of reality and how we tend to, like Charles just said, we act from a place of, that a place that is sequestered from, the complexity of the world. We kind of act from this artifice, this place, and political action seems to take its spirit from that artificial place that we create for ourselves. Where I come from, we kind of pound it into our ears every day through our stories, through our proverbs. We teach ourselves that we are way out of our depths. We don't exactly know how to respond. And the moment we figure it out, we've lost our way. So there's a principle. Charles spoke about principles. I don't like the notion of principles, but I'll just throw one here called I think it's called the parity principle. And it's in the cognitive studies that try to situate the mind. And the people who articulated the parity principle were trying to say, look, the mind isn't brain bound. If you think of the mind as this thing that is encased in, the skull that has, clearly defined skin boundaries, then you're mistaken, because the mind spills through everything. The mind is the environment. The mind is everywhere. I think about that, and then I recognize how it is possible for us to want to act from a place of correct action. Most of activism today takes it for granted that we need to get our act together first before we go out into the world and act upon it in a way that is coherent with the world outside of us. So we need correct action, and that translates into correct response. But if we take the parity principle for granted, then the mind is already outside, then everything is already touching each other. Then there's no mind outside. There's no such thing as correct action, which means that there is no wrong approach, which means that we're out of joint, which means that we're swimming in a sea of responses that cannot be human-centered, is not anthropocentric in any way. And so the African elders will say the wave doesn't arrive before the ocean. The wave doesn't arrive to the shore before the ocean. They arrive at the same time. To assume that we can act from a place of purity, or to finally figure it out and then act upon the world, is to mouth off that old adage, like, give me a place to stand and I shall change the world. And I don't know if any of you have read Chinua Achebe, but his response to that was, there's no place to stand. The world moves, and we're in the world, so there's no place to stand. And it's this coming to terms with the fact that we are of the world. We're not in the world, but we're what the world is doing. I think that's the most difficult thing to accept. It's especially for those of us that are gestating in this modern apparatus. We are always going to be caught up in the situation of asking, what does it mean to not know? What does it mean to act? And I think it's also important to note that not knowing what to do matters. It's not a deficit in the equation, in the cosmic scheme of things. Not knowing how to act, not knowing what to do next, actually substantiates the world. If we take the parity principle for granted, if we take it for granted that we're porous and we spill through things. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that there's no place to stand on. I'm not sure about the notion that there's no way to have the wrong response. I'm not sure about that. There was something about Charles' answer before that really hit me, because it reached me as an answer in a surprising way. Because when Charles, when you were talking about this situation, when you were imagining this refugee family and asking what were you doing when, let's say, there was the bombing of Aleppo, and your response was, if I was video playing, then maybe I won't meet her, but maybe if I was taking care of my grandmother, I did meet her. What this answer gave to me is basically there's a very unknown response where I honestly can be aware if I meet the situation or not. But what this meeting the situation means can be maybe has nothing to do directly with political, but I can have an honest response that something that I was doing in this moment, it can be whatever, but it was meeting. And this is, as I understand you, also listening to something different, because that it's, I mean, it's always easy to talk about a heart response, but I don't find a better word for it. I said listening to the heart that something is met here, because something I was in contact with and caring for in this moment was important. And in this, I'm in a very unknown place, because I really ongoingly have to ask my question: Am I meeting the world as it's happening? And the responses can be very different, but it's always asked me: Am I meeting what is asked for? I'm not sure if I understood you right, but it hit me, the response that put me at the same time in a very unknown place, but I was in a place that I do have responses from my own perception.
You know, even like watching a video game, I don't want to trigger this kind of cycle of self-rejection that approves of myself only if I, were helping my grandmothers are all dead now, but doing something that is obviously helping another being, and then rejecting myself if I'm doing something that seems indulgent, or because if I see somebody playing video games all the time, basically, again, what is it like to be you? Probably, well, maybe this person just needs to retreat into some insulated space and lick their wounds for a while. Maybe they are hurt so much and so crushed in their creativity, or so impoverished of engagement with the material world that they need the stimulation of video games to take them away from themselves, to alleviate the pain, to meet certain neurological development needs in the only way that's available to them. Like, I don't have judgment about people who are spending their days watching video games. And if I'm not doing that, if I am doing work that the feedback from the world is thank you, then I can be thankful that I am in a position to do that work, that I haven't been so damaged or so unlucky, so oppressed that I'm unable to do beautiful work, so even the work that we do is not our own work. And that's why I'm always a little uncomfortable when you say, Charles, your work, it really isn't my work. It's work that needs to be done and that I'm serving because I'm in a position to do it. I'm in a position to do the work. But I know that if something happened to me, then the work would find somebody else to do it. And I mean, there are many people doing very similar kinds of work. So I don't know if that helps clear up. I mean, I think that there is, there's a paradox here. And this question of what should I do, what shouldn't I do, non-doing, doing, like this paradox, I think this is one of those things that maybe you shouldn't approach too near. It's like there are these dangerous spots in nature too, where you're not supposed to go. I don't know. But I'm not, I don't feel called to really analyze and parse that paradox and to try to explain, to kind of explain it away. I feel the presence of a taboo.
Charles, I think this proves that we are truly telepathic, because immediately you started talking about not wanting to approach. The word came to mind, tapu. The Polynesian, the word tapu, which is the root word for taboo, which means approach with care. Of course, that is different in our time, but it means approach with some level of hesitation. And yes, I think this talking about responses is a taboo subject in that sense. But I also like to pour a libation of words, if you will, around this just a little bit and see if I can wet the ground. Where I come from, because there's a lot of rich depth and abundance of thought around responding to the world in that locality. There is a givenness to the material world around us. So I remember studying under a healer. I would even call him a shaman right now. He was just a priest, a healer priest. And I was asking him questions about how do people turn mad? I'm just speaking colloquially right now. How do people suffer mental disturbances in his own cosmovision? And I remember him saying, when a young man steps out of his house and he steps upon an eyelash that has been dislodged from another person who is sad, when he steps on it, he will grow mad. And that sounded utterly preposterous. I couldn't draw the lines between stepping on an eyelash and suffering psychopathological states. And I would ask him another question like, what do you do with auditory hallucinations? And he would say, why do you want to do anything about it? Those are your ancestors probably trying to tell you about tomorrow, or tell you to make pounded yam or something like that. And I think here's the deal with trying to situate wrong or right responses, trying to create a taxonomy of right ways to respond to a world that is still figuring itself out. And I think, Elizabeth, you taught me this phrase yesterday when we were having a chat. Cultural autism, you called it. How we parse the world into bits and pieces and boxes. It seems that we are used to a causality. This A plus B will lead to C, or 2 plus 2 is definitely 4. But like I think any good mathematician who knows his onions would tell you that 2 plus 2 doesn't always equate to 4. And 4 is not always explained by the fact that 2 and 2 added up to each other. In other words, we live in a world that is a world of magical causalities, where things don't add up, where things bump into each other in diffractive measures and spill into other places. And I think this is the, and I hope I'm not speaking esoteric, fluffy stuff, but this is the grounding for inviting us to take a step back, slow down, and examine the way we see, examine the way we evaluate the world, and evaluate or articulate responses. We need to, there's that paradox again of saying we need to do this. Okay, I'll just keep quiet here. I don't want to go too deep into a rabbit hole.
All right, yeah, I want to add something to that.
Oh,
okay.
So there's something that I've been playing with as that's kind of, playing with isn't the right word, but we're not in a culture that asks us to engage with existence, really. And Charles, when you were speaking about the video player and somebody's playing video games all the time, it's like, what's his existential status in a sense, or what's happening there with that human existence? Or stepping on an eyelash of somebody who has dropped it because of sadness. There's some kind of existential, touch point there that we're so unaccustomed to living from. And there's just something that I feel called by what I'm hearing, that is speaking about just the that's wanting me to feels like it wants me to live more raw, in touch with this thing that is life, that isn't explainable, and yet that I'm responsible for. And I don't mean in some kind of stereotypical way or occupational way, but it is what we are. and there's something about how I exist as layers and layers of trying not to face that, I think. I mean.
So I have a little story that's coming to mind that might be relevant here. First of all, I'll quote Thoreau, who said, "It takes two to speak the truth, one to speak and another to hear," by which he meant the same words that are truth to one person may not be truth to somebody else. So the things that Bayo and I have been saying about stepping back from what you think you know, disengaging from habits of action, I would not say those to somebody who is fully engaged in something that he really believes in and is just immersed in that and like in that phase. That would be the wrong thing to say to that person. It's only when you come to the point where you ask that question, where you're like, wow, have I been doing things right? Have I been doing things wrong? Has it all made any difference whatsoever? Where you're getting weary and burnt out. It's only then that it is the truth to validate a phase of inwardness or a phase of non-doing or a phase of unknowing and that kind of thing. So, someone who's like working day and night to, save refugees or something like that, like I'm not going to tell them to not do or to pull back. But so my friend Pat McCabe, who's Diné Navajo, and has practiced very, very deep practices from the Lakota way for decades now. In one communication with the spirits, they told her, "Your understanding of cause and effect is very rudimentary." We just don't, like Bayo was saying, this is what I was thinking when Bayo was talking about how I can't remember exactly how you put it, Bayo, but like the causality being very sloppy, and the world, and the idea of the cultural autism, where we put things into little categories and try to draw neat arrows of cause and effect between them and try to understand the world and parse it. And it's not really like that. Like the things spill over into other boxes that would seem to be completely disconnected to the box that we had put them in. An eyelash. Like what system of causality would validate that? Stepping on an eyelash will make you crazy. I mean, but sometimes, especially in that phase where your understanding of how the world works has been destroyed, and you're in one of those in-between places in life. Could happen with the end of a relationship or a job or a health crisis or something that's like, whoa, I just don't know. In those sacred moments of life, which can last days, weeks, months, or even years, we tend to experience a lot of synchronicity, which means basically things happening that have no causal explanation, but that seem relevant. They seem significant. A certain person shows up at a certain time saying just the right thing. A man told me a story a few days ago. He was playing with angel cards, and he said, pick the card for today. Music. Okay, so maybe I should listen to music today or something. And so they were in the car, he and his wife, and he was driving. She had the radio on to some talk show, and he was like, I'd really like to hear some music. So she turned it to another channel. They had their iPod plugged in, but it wasn't on the setting for the iPod. It was on the radio setting. So she turned it to something else, and it's classical music, and that's okay for a while. And he says, I really want to hear ABBA. I haven't heard ABBA for 10 years. And then a few seconds after that, without anyone touching the iPod, it somehow jumped to the ABBA playlist and at high volume started playing an ABBA song. And the song was something about, I believe in angels or something like that. And then it played the entire ABBA playlist. And then at some point, he and his wife both had this feeling that there's somebody in the back seat. They both turned their heads simultaneously, feeling that there were like angels back there bopping to the music, and he would press the play button. So that's just, I'm sure everyone on this call has encountered synchronicities, maybe not quite that dramatic, but maybe so. Or maybe it's just those things like this meeting is a trace of another intelligence that actually rules this world that we have no idea of. So I'll end with a little story, another story. My friend, well, I've only met him a couple times, but a man, Mark Dubois, he's an environmental activist, lifelong. And he told me this story at Findhorn, I believe. He had been working with a group to stop a dam from being built in California that would flood a pristine river valley. It would flood a pristine valley and destroy all kinds of, endangered species and so on. It was just this horrendous dam project. And he and the group of activists fought tooth and nail to stop this dam. Legal action, petitions, direct action, chaining themselves to the machines, getting arrested, et cetera, and they failed. Nothing they did worked. And the dam got built, and the river was destroyed. And it was so painful for them that he said after that, they could not bear to even get together again because the defeat was so painful. Yet, that was the last major hydro project in North America. That marked the end of the era of dam building. And since then, dams were even starting to take some of them down. So it was as if their attempt to stop the dam was a prayer, where God said, "Are you really serious about stopping dams? Let's see. Are you serious enough? Are you sincere enough in your prayer? Because actions are a prayer. Are you sincere enough in your prayer that you will face certain failure and do it anyway? That you will put everything on the line? Let me see how serious you are." And they demonstrated themselves to indeed be very, very serious, very sincere. So God said, "Okay, I will grant your prayer. There will be no more dams in North America." So this kind of speaks to this question about, what do I do and what's the right action and stuff. Even your failures, even your actions that come from a delusion about how the world works, even if they are futile and hopeless, but they seem right at the time, those will have an effect on this world. Your failures are your prayers, and they will have an effect. And you can't game the system. You can't go into it knowing that it's futile, knowing that it's just a prayer. You have to actually dedicate yourself to it. It has to concord with your understanding, temporary and limited and rudimentary though it may be, of cause and effect. And the results may not be what you expect, but there will be an effect that comes from the deep intentions that motivate the action to begin with.
Okay.
Maybe one last question, if we still have the time for this, because I see this as a kind of a red thread to, in fact, what you, Charles, are saying, but also by what you were bringing in, and it has both to do with the not knowing and with the listening, because what you brought in right now with the synchronicity, I find very related what you talked before, Charles, about honoring the taboo. Because I can see how there's a part of my intellectual side which basically doesn't want to honor any taboo, I want to look into and analyze everything. But there is a listening quality to something that I could understand that there's something where a taboo can be right, and just basically analyzing it and dissecting it can be exactly the wrong thing to do. But this is the listening to something that holds both. It holds the respect for the taboo and it holds the openness for the synchronicity. And this is what I'm hearing. And it brings me in a place where I definitely don't know, but it also brings me to a place where I have a hinge what I should listen to in order to be here.
Mm.
That sounds reasonable.
Can I tell a very brief story, just on the spirit of Tom's, evocation of not knowing, and I don't know I don't know if Charles has heard this before, but probably. So there's a story of the tortoise, and the tortoise had this urge to preserve knowledge, to know everything possible. He imagined a world that had no taboos, a world without boundaries, if you will, without limitations. And so he embarked on a quest to gather everything that is possibly knowable about the world, to eagles, to trees, to soil, to ants. He went everywhere. How does the eagle fly? And the eagle would voluntarily give him that knowledge. And the tortoise would take that knowledge and stick it in a gourd that hung on his neck. And then he would go about his work. And so it so happened that after a year or two, the tortoise had gathered everything, like Google, just gathered everything there was to know about the world and stuffed it in this gourd that was on his neck, tied to his neck. And so the next thing to imagine here is that he would need to secure this precious treasure. And so he decided to hang the gourd on a tree. But he had difficulties climbing the tree, you see, because the tortoise's hands are very short. And so he couldn't wrap his hand round the tree. And he struggled to climb the tree, but kept on slipping and falling. And then a grasshopper, in many stories, it's his son, but the version I like, it's a grasshopper. A grasshopper comes along and says, you can easily just put the gourd on your back. And then he wanders away. And in that moment, the tortoise is like, if I gathered all there was to know about the world, if all the knowledge is in this gourd right now, how come I didn't know that? How come I didn't have that simple notion that I could easily put the gourd on his back? And so he just changed his mind. He knew it was a horrible project after all. He climbed the tree, put the gourd on his back, climbed the tree, and then released the knowledge back into the world. And when our parents told us this story, they told us to remind us to kind of put a leash, and I'm not saying this in a horrific way, not in any material, literal sense, but it was to put a leash on our attempts to figure out the world in one fell swoop, to come to the world in a way of respect, knowing that, and I think there is some notion here that knowing or not knowing means, harboring some kind of ignorance, or there's some kind of negative space, there are deficits, something to be completed. But the way we figure it out in our culture is knowledge is always multivocal. It's always many voices. There's always a congress, a commonwealth of activity. It's never independent. Knowledge is not complete. It's not boundaried. It spills, it falls, it's out of joint, it's partial. It's always partial. The moment we get it, the moment it's complete, then everything breaks down. So it's, I just wanted to offer that there, the story of the tortoise. We tell stories and we teach ourselves in Proverbs because it's, taboos. What can I say?
Wondering if we could break into smaller groups right now and go further. Charles, I asked you to think of a question that the groups could engage with. I don't know if something that comes out of our conversation now or something that you were thinking about before. but to give everybody some direction.
Yeah. Okay. What just came into my mind?
Mm.
It's what is the thing that gets under your skin right now, of all that's happening in the world, which is maybe a step toward what is the thing that calls you to act according to what you know, imperfect though it may be. But what is the thing that gets under your skin? Out of all of the things happening on this planet, sometimes it's like a really trivial thing. Or it could be, you know, the big thing like nuclear holocaust or climate change, you know, but it could be like a small thing, like a pond that you visited as a child and you went back there and it's gone now. Or a child who was I don't even want to say this one, but sometimes there's like just a tiny outcropping of the story of separation that just kind of pierces you for some reason. Not because it's the most important thing in the world, but it's just that thing that calls you away from your video game. Yeah, that's my question.
Elizabeth, you're muted. Yeah.
Just two things before we go into the groups, to think about the group. One is to take whatever time, take some time at the beginning of the group to slow down and to take in Charles's question, slow down and give yourself some space before jumping into speaking. And also, we have just such a small amount of time to engage with each other. If you could give your name and where you're from, and then start to engage with the discussion. We've created a Facebook page for people to share more personal information and projects and so forth, so that we can free up this space to really see if we can go somewhere together. And part of going somewhere together, I think, is really being curious about how each other engage with these questions, and where this question touches you that you want to bring something forward. So let's go to groups. And this part is an open forum, and we're running a bit late, so we're just going to go for about 10 minutes. So bring, where did you go? What struck you in your in your conversation, or in this entire conversation?
What struck me was that we were all giving different examples, and we were all saying the same thing about the unknowing, about sensing into what's emerging within us and within our worlds, and the discomfort of it, the discomfort of being with not knowing how to be and do, and not knowing, just the discomfort of being weird, I guess, by living in that space. So it was remarkable. Our examples were all different, and yet we all were speaking to the same thing.
I was with Denise. I thought we really went somewhere with this. This is the first time that we look at how our external structures, cultural structures, might change. And it felt like there was such an opening to a new way of being, in that trusting something and opening up to allowing something to change. But we can't know how the economy needs to change, or allocation of resources. And yet the creative aspiration of humanity's creativity felt like almost like a prayer or an invocation to something greater. And that everyone's desire for that was part of that. It really was beautiful. I felt we really went somewhere with this.
Okay.
That was good.
Okay, that was good.
Thank you. One of the things
Well, I thought I agree with Robin that we're all aware that they've swept these issues, that we speak to each other mentally and sweep all the problems under the rug. I think there'd be a lot less conflict if society was a little bit more honest about it. I shared in my group something I just read yesterday from the Buddha, and I thought it seemed so appropriate to this conversation. And Buddha was talking to his disciples, and he said, 2,500 years ago, that the children are in the burning house and they won't come out to safety. And I thought, oh, that's just what's happening to the earth right now, 2,500 years later. Mm-hmm. And what he did was he devised a way to entice them out, which speaks to our need for new myths, instead of the myths we're going under with conflict and confrontation. And how do we entice the children out of the burning house? Because they're so distracted with playing that they won't listen. Anyway, I share that if it helps anybody. It really struck me. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Savannah. Robin, were you about to say something?
Yeah, one of the things that I took from our trio conversation is just around trusting the response that's coming through in the moment. I'm going to speak a little louder. Can people hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, it's better.
You're a little quiet, but yeah.
A little quiet.
Yeah.
So it's trusting the right response that comes through in the moment, even though the connection may not seem to make sense. It might be like the eyelash falling from a sad man, and we might not know why it's coming through. But I was sharing that I noticed that there are certain triggers. I can get I can see a lot of triggers with Trump right now. Get very lost in my own shadow work around that, and I get fascinated with the triggering and how he and others are get under my skin. And one of the things that Angelo said that reminded me that within all of that, there are also indications, there's synchronicities, there's things of light that are also wanting to come through. Duterte, that for him, one of the things that came through is planting a tree. And it just reminded me to not lose sight of those indications that are all around, those messages that are coming through as I go into the day, to just stay open to those messages that are coming through all the time around response. Mm-hmm. Especially when it makes no sense.
And to also support and continue what Robin was sharing about our triadic sharing. There was 3 of us, Robin and Ishmael. And it was amazing that Ishmael encountered some sort of technical difficulty, and we were communicating to him via chat. And we were also more mindful in the process. And he was also sharing about something that was also experiencing in a similar fashion of being caught in a situation where you have to handle separation among the opinions of your friends. You're also experiencing something politically interesting in Brazil, just like how it is here in the Philippines. And the division that is becoming prevalent leaves us in a place where we are exactly like what you were saying earlier, Charles, of being in between, of being not too sure about how to respond, and with much desire to respond according to what we believe is objectively right, is what I picked from Ishmael's sharing as well. But just to continue having separation, I guess, in that sense, while also being aware of our triggers, like what Robin was sharing, my big takeaway from our discussion, from our dialogue. And I guess what's also important for me from all the discourses earlier about not knowing and unknowing is just realizing the fact that there's, as what Bayo said, with the mind spills through us, and with this intelligence, it's just beyond our limited capacity, being units of intelligence ourselves. And what you said also, Elizabeth, about engaging in our existence, just staying also in what is called for us to do, and acknowledging how this intelligence comes through us and wants us to do something that we don't completely understand, and appreciating the story that we also do not completely know and understand, and identifying the roles that each one of us can play by being aware of the interconnectedness, will be my personal grant, so to speak, or what I shared earlier, to be I think my sort of calling now, which is just to find that way of responding beyond separation, which is so difficult to do now with what we're experiencing in our country. Yeah. So.
Oh, was there somebody? I missed someone? No? Okay. I think we should probably wrap up now and let Charles go to his family and lunch. And thank you very, very much for being with us. I deeply appreciate your taking the time. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, really am just delighted that we were all able to be in this conversation together.
Yeah, thank you for making it happen. It was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Brother Bayo, till next time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Mm.